Bonjour. Comment allez-vous? Good day. I hope I find you well. Today we will be talking about the path to agility. That is not exactly a talk about Scrum. And that's because Scrum is a tool that we can use to become agile, but Scrum itself doesn't make us agile. The quote up on the screen is from an American president, and it's one of the quotes about a basis for agility, which is, "I am a firm believer in the people. If given the truth, they can be depended upon to meet any crisis. The great point is to bring them the real facts." And this is, of course, the basis of agility, because you can't be agile if you don't know where you are and what is the best thing to do. So we're going to talk about agility. What is it? How do we do it? How Scrum is a tool to become agile, what a path for agility might be, and some next steps. Agility, not a very hard word. Mostly it means that we are flexible and that we have the capacity and the capability of rapidly and efficiently adapting to change. So in software development, that would mean that we would have the ability to rapidly generate functionality that could be used to take advantage of change. It's also considered the ability to take advantage of opportunities. And then there's the caveat, which is while controlling risk. Agility is kind of important now because we have not just competitors in our own countries, but we have global competitors. So no longer are we just competing in our backyard, we're competing worldwide. We also have customers that demand more from us. And this is because of our competitors and their more increasing sophisticated applications, which are those more complex products, such as used airplanes, cars, our arts, medical devices, places where you never thought software. So agility is then important because our complex business organizations, complex marketplaces, internationalization, complex applications, riskier applications, competitive advantage, all of which add up to competitive survival. That is, those that can't be agile will certainly do less well than those that can be agile and take advantage of opportunities. And this is the purpose of Scrum, is to allow organizations to do this. So that's the organizational basis of Scrum. From a software development Scrum, it's simply to improve our profession so that agility is possible. So how do we do this? How do we become agile? Again, what we're going to look at is the first thing that agility requires is empiricism. So we said agility is the ability to take advantage of opportunities. Empiricism is exactly the same thing. It's that we are making actions based on experience or experiment rather than on prediction. So we're always ready to take advantage of an opportunity. So empiricism is the basis of it. Now, this is kind of a weird word, and so I wanted to give us a short exercise to make ourselves familiar with what an empirical approach might be. This is an exercise that I'm going to ask you to spend several minutes working with the people sitting next to you on. And the purpose of this is to understand the power of empiricism. So the situation is that you are in a 20-meter, 40-meter room in this building. And your job is to keep that room at a constant 22 degrees centigrade throughout the entire day. Unfortunately, the thermostat has not yet been invented. Also, unfortunately, once you start the going for 22 degrees centigrade, you cannot enter the room during the day. So at the before the very start of the day, between 7 and 8 o'clock, you and the several people sitting next to you have to set the heating and air conditioning and venting and blinds so that they will adjust themselves at the appropriate times during the day to maintain this temperature of 22 degrees centigrade throughout the day. You will have to do this by writing a program that you will put in a computer that will turn on the heating, turn on the air conditioning, turn them off, turn on the venting, turn on and off the blinds, move them, so that based on all the things that you, of course, will take into account, it will stay at 22 degrees. So one of the variables, of course, you have to take into account in programming the computer would be the number of people in the room. If there are more, you may have to tell the computer that when more people are in the room to turn on more air conditioning. If there are less, you may need to tell it to turn down the air conditioning. If the sun is brighter, you may have to tell it to increase the air conditioning. If it is cold outside, you may have to tell it to increase the heating. So you are meeting with a couple of people around you between 7 and 8 a.m., and you are writing a program to put in the computer to control these things from 8 o'clock until 5:30 to keep the room 22 degrees centigrade. What I'd like you to do is spend several minutes now talking with the people next to you and identifying what some of those variables might be. Go.
Là, c'est un peu l'extrême. Il vous demande de faire un exercice alors qu'il est remote. Moi, je...
I hope you've had time to think through these variables, because how successfully we can program that computer, the health of the people in the room will depend on it. Here are some variables that we may want to consider, and you may want to compare those that you thought of and see if they fit in. So certainly the number of people in the room, metabolism of the people in the rooms, that is, are they heat generators or heat sinks? The activities of each person in the room at every point in time during the day. Are they doing exercises? Are they sitting there bored? What are they doing? Are people opening and closing the doors? As they're opening and closing the doors, are they open for very long? And what is the temperature of the hallway outside that is letting in air? What is the weather, including sun, clouds, outside temperature? And of course, you'd have to know this at every point, like maybe every minute or two during the day. The temperature of the adjoining rooms, the things that are going on in the adjoining rooms, the construction material of the building, the floor of the room, will food be served, when, what type, how much, how hot will it be? So all of these, and perhaps even other variables, you would have to figure into an equation that you would program into the computer. You should know calculus to do this, because you'd be generating a multivariate, nonlinear equation in which every variable would be dependent upon every other variable. So I hope the people you chose are very, very good programmers. Not many places were successful with this. The programming, the variables were too many. and a number of people died, passed out from heat stroke, or froze to death. And that led to the invention of something you're very familiar with, the thermostat. So thermostats were created for situations that are complex. So if I asked you to control the heat in the room and it was a simple situation, that is the lower left-hand corner, that is the building construction, the weather patterns, the people in the room, all of that was very, very well known. Then we could have programmed the computer. If it were complicated where we knew a lot, but there were some things that we didn't know, still we might help the people survive. But if it's complex, where in this circumstance more is unknown than is known, which is our situation with controlling the temperature in the room, then we run into a situation where it's very hard to come up with a program that's going to work. If it's a chaotic situation where it's very, very little or nothing is known, then we actually don't stand much of a chance. So this type of complexity that we were dealing with in trying to control the temperature led to the thermostat, which is good for controlling complex and sometimes even chaotic circumstances. And the thermostat is actually what we call an empirical process-driven device. That is, it does not care what the variables are. It totally ignores the variables. The actual temperature in the room at any point instead drives the thermostat to put on air conditioning, heating, and maybe even move blinds if it could. So these are, what it does instead is goes out periodically and checks the temperature in the room, compares it to the 22 degrees centigrade that we set as its goal, and based on the differential, it will initiate heating, air conditioning, or slide movement. Now, it's probably important that we have the thermostat inspect the ambient or the current temperature in the room frequently so that it can put on heating and air conditioning so that it can keep the temperature somewhat stable. If it only checks them every 2 hours, the amount of temperature differential may be too great for it to overcome. So we certainly wanted to do frequent inspection of the temperature and adaptation by turning by air conditioning and heating systems on. This is called just-in-time planning. And it's based on actuals, so we don't care about the weather forecast. We don't care about the prediction of how many people will be in the room. All we actually care about are the real temperature in that room at any point in time. There is, so we did lay down one criteria, which is it has to inspect the temperature frequently enough to keep it within the range. The other requirement is that this thermostat requires what we call transparency, as we talked about earlier on. That means if we walk up to the thermostat and put a wet washcloth on it, the thermostat is not going to have transparency. It will be thinking the temperature maybe is 15 degrees, whereas you sitting in that room will know that it's 23, 24, 25 degrees. So it is going to kick in heating rather than air conditioning. So the thermostat, or this empirical approach, only works if the decisions that are being made are based on information which is agreed on and transparent and the same to everyone who's engaged. So a bit of a difficulty for empiricism, but certainly less difficult than writing that equation. So if we look at two different approaches, the type that we did for coming up with our formula is what we call a predictive approach. That is, we do all of our planning up front. We predict the future, we look at everything that's going to happen, and based on that, we come up with a plan, formula, and we execute or deliver doing that plan. And as I indicated earlier, that really works well if everything's simple. The empirical approach has very, very little planning up front. Instead, there's a little bit of planning where it says we think the temperature is right now is this compared to that. So we're going to do something, kicking and heating or air conditioning. Then we're going to look again and do just-in-time planning, deliver, just-in-time planning, deliver. So it also has a huge amount of planning, but it's just-in-time planning based on actuals rather than predictions. And the home ground for this type of planning is where the number of variables, the number of things going on are so unknown that finding out what's really happening rather than planning is the only approach that works. So if we look at more traditional things, the usual things that we do, looking at predictive processes, looking at our waterfall process, which is our form of it, it is where we plan the entire project up front, including the requirements and everything. And then we do what that plan says until we are done. Changes are not loved. Another approach for that, so that we can do this and have an empirical process, is we take all those things that we used to do in a predictive process, but we do them in much less time, like a month or less. And that would be the length of an iteration or a scrum or a sprint in Scrum. And so if we're doing it in a month or less and we're doing all the same things, of course that means that we're going to do it on fewer things. So in the top approach, predictive, we're going to take into account a lot of variables. In the bottom one, the empirical approach, we're only going to take into account the most highest value, highest priority requirements. And the other thing about this is, since we're working on fewer things, and it's just a short thing, we're going to create something that's done at the end of it, just like a predictive approach, so it's iterative and incremental. But we found that if we're doing this in a short cycle like this, so it's empirical, we find it more productive to use self-organizing cross-functional teams. We found experimentally that this creates more productive, more creative, and higher quality increments at the end. So that's interesting, to me anyway. That's saying that the empirical approach requires frequent inspection and adaptation, and it requires transparency in order to operate successfully. Now, Scrum is a tool you can use to do this. It's a tool you can use to create more information more frequently, a month or less, that a person can look at to make decisions about what is the best thing they can do to take advantage of opportunities. Or if they spot an opportunity, you can initiate an iteration or iterations or sprints to build something that they can use to take advantage of. So Scrum is just a framework with which people can address complex problems and productively and creatively develop products of the highest possible value. It is a tool you can use to become agile. Using Scrum does not make you agile. Using Scrum makes it so you're using Scrum, and it makes things transparent so you can improve to support agility. So we often use Scrum to remove the constraints for agility. When we bring it down, the entire process down to, let's say, a 2-week sprint, a lot of things that weren't visible when we're doing a 10 or 12-month project become very visible. It's kind of like taking a microscope and looking at what's going on. So we use Scrum when we see all these things to remove waste. We optimize productivity. We only build the valuable stuff. We don't, and more importantly than only building the valuable stuff, is we don't build the low-value stuff. It's hard to be agile if you have to maintain a lot of low-value stuff. We also weave around development constraints, such as, is our system capable of having small releases, and weave around customer constraints, such as, are they able to absorb releases frequently if we're being agile? And this allows us to go after some very, very inexpensive, low-hanging fruit. For instance, if we have a cross-functional self-organizing team, not a hard thing to have, we have found that those teams are 100% more productive than if you have a team that's being managed and directed and told what to do. Wow, that's an incredible savings for very little effort. The second thing that we found is that if you are only building the most valuable stuff, iteration, sprint by sprint by sprint, and you stop when you have the most value you can and what's needed, you often don't build 60% of the stuff that you used to build before. So stopping earlier than you used to before reduces the cost of a project by at least half. Not only that, you don't have to sustain and maintain and enhance that low value stuff, so that may be another 10 or 15% savings. So rather than going out and buying something like RUP or something like that for $4 or $5 million, these are very low-hanging, common sense things that you can do to vastly increase your capability to be productive, be agile. So that's how Scrum becomes a tool to become agile. Now, what we found when organizations start using Scrum, when they reduce it from that long cycle down to a sprint of, let's say, 2 weeks, we find that those organizations start running into what we call Scrum butts. And what these, I'm not sure how that works in French, and Xavier can chip in if this doesn't make any sense, but a Scrum butt is someone saying that they want to use Scrum, but they can't because there are some problems that they're running into that make it very, very hard to use Scrum. And so Scrum butts are a reflection of the cultural attitudes and traditional practices in the organization that Scrum's running into. A syntax of a Scrum butt is it always has this part. We use Scrum, that's the start, but, and then whatever the reason is, the daily Scrum meetings are too much overhead, and then the workaround. Because the team members don't need to meet so often, so we only have them once a week unless we need them more or less often. So it's got the Scrum, then it's got the problem it ran into, and then it's got the workaround in which they've modified Scrum so that they don't have that problem anymore. So we often view Scrum as like your mother-in-law. Those of you that are married, this will make sense. Those of you that aren't married, this will be what you may face. The mother-in-law is the person who always knew that her son or daughter could have married better. And she intends to help you become good enough for her son or daughter. And by adopting Scrum, you have just invited this dear lady to come live with you so that she can continually point out the reasons why you can't build software in a way that supports agility. And of course you cherish that because there's nothing more fun than having someone continually point out everything that you're doing wrong. So you can either at that point listen carefully, take notes, and maybe even create a list of improvements that may consume your whole life. Or you can take tape and put it over her mouth so you don't have to listen to her anymore. A Scrum butt is the equivalent of the tape over her mouth. Rather than listening to what Scrum's saying, you have changed Scrum so you don't hear it anymore. So for instance, the daily Scrum, it is a just-in-time planning meeting, and it's intended to reduce technical debt. That is, when people do things that don't work together with what other people are doing, the effort to undo them is much greater than if you had simply done them right up front. And so we meet every day and look at where we are during the sprint so that we can readjust our work that we're going to do for the next day to optimize the chances of us delivering what we've said. Very, very valuable point for optimizing productivity and value. You eliminate it, and you immediately start incurring technical debt. So this is a Scrum adoption profile. The really good news is that as of 2008, more organizations are using Agile than Waterfall. And the bulk of those that are using Agile are using Scrum. However, what we have found, this is Jeff Sutherland and myself, is that of those using Scrum, most of them are in the Scrum butt phase. That is, they have found many things culturally and organizationally and technically that make it so they can't do iterative, incremental, high-value, just-in-time planning with a solid increment at the end of every sprint. And so they either have subsided into an organization which is only partially there and won't ever go further, or they have taken all those things that they can't do, and this is an action plan for them to continue improving until they really are an agile organization. So that's the right hand, the tailing edge of the distribution are those that are really using Scrum. Now that is a really good thing that we've gotten so many organizations that far or even into improving. However, what Jeff and I have noticed is that many of these people, organizations that have achieved excellence, when the person who is leading that effort, the vice president of engineering, the CEO, someone like that, when they leave the organization slips back bit by bit, doing things that it used to, and the excellence is lost. They're still better than they were, but that leadership that helps them and gives them the direction to be excellent is gone. And the existing culture, ways in which people are incented, way in which people are promoted, way in which people work together, goes away as the way it used to happen reasserts itself. Little discouraging, but Jeff and I will get over it. Matter of fact, we have ideas about what we could do about it. Some of the things that Scrum does on the current culture that cause this to happen is when you're using Scrum, empirical replaces predictive. This means that the art of the possible, doing the best you can, replaces just wanting something and hoping that if you say that you want it loudly enough, it will happen. And when someone who is used to empirical management leaves and you hire a new predictive manager, everything slides back. We also have the idea that transparency is value neutral. That is very much like the Abraham Lincoln quote, we want to see where we are so we can make decisions about what to do. So we do want to see waste. We do want to see impediments. We do want to see when we don't do what we said we would, so we can make the best decision possible. Now, if you have someone that values that, you will do well. If you have a new director or top manager come in who has always survived because he or she's good at politics, that transparency is horrible because it disables politics. Politics only survives when things aren't clear. Authority moves down the organization. Scrum teams are self-organizing and self-management, and accountability is very specific. If you have someone come into the organization after it becomes excellent, and they believe that the only way that things will work is if they tell people what to do because they're so smart, Scrum will suffer. Agility will suffer. And also, Scrum and agility require more work. You have to pay attention to what's going on, look at things that you may not want to see, and make some hard choices about the best things to do rather than simply wishing that what you wanted were occurring. So all of these things are different than traditional cultures. And all of these things, if the culture doesn't change, will cause the culture to reassert itself if someone leading this excellence leaves the organization. So we found that what's needed is a mindset change. First being that there's a compelling story, that everyone understands what is being done, why it's being done, and why it's really important to do, and that they can look at it and at least make an effort at it. That there are some reinforcing mechanisms, that is, that there are incentives for people to change rather than disincentives. That we go through a whole effort of building the capabilities, both in terms of training, skills, coaching, tooling, both within the development organizations, the product management, the customers, the sales, the marketing. And also that our role models within the organization are people from the top to the bottom of the organization that are setting the example for everyone. So all these things become very, very critical to a successful, not just a successful change to agility, but a retention of agility as a corporate culture. So we've developed, to help organizations do this, an engagement model. And we encourage you to think about this as you are taking an approach at putting agility and Scrum in organization-wide. This engagement model is based on 20 years of our experience. It's also based on what I published in 2005 called a CXO playbook. And all those things were very good from a technical and an organizational point of view, but given the criticality of cultural change, we also collaborated with John Kotter at Harvard Business School, who's an internationally recognized expert on organizational change, and we've added his model for organizational change to our playbook. So we're not just going to bring in automated testing tools. We're not just going to use acceptance test-driven development. We're not just going to have prioritized backlogs. We're also going to start engaging and changing the culture in which we're working. So this is the whole thing wrapped in an organizational change program. And we start this with a pre-engagement assessment. That is, before we even start, what we want to do is put some metrics in place, such as defects, productivity, value, and start running some test projects against them so that we can start capturing some baseline metrics. We also may use some value stream mapping to identify organizational impediments. And what we're also going to then do, based on our experiment, is identify things that can be done, low-hanging fruit, to rapidly increase return on investment and organizational value. So this is a fairly rapid, short cycle, 2 or 3 month engagement in which an organization sees what the benefits might be or might not be and quantifies them, so then when it makes decisions, they're based on numbers, not just on desire. Desire is good, it doesn't sustain change though. So in our playbook, what we do is we have an initiation play. This is where a leadership team is formed. They establish the vision, the urgency. They start communicating organization-wide about what's going to happen. They determine the metrics that are going to be used in identifying some pilots. We then start running pilots. And these are used to create some wins, to communicate what's happening, to start removing impediments, and to start accumulating more and more of these metrics. So this is our first visible live experiment with this. Once this happens, then we expand it into the organization, continually using Scrum more and more, using agility and product management more and more. We also start creating points within the organization where we are fully establishing this, such as human resource policies, such as sales organization practices, such as customer engagement practices. And then we start achieving impact. And at this point, what we're doing is starting to promote the people who want to work this way. We're starting to use them as leaders in the organization. So the processes are changing, the management's changing, values are changing. This is changing the culture of the organization. And at the very end of this, we are looking and reviewing and making sure that there is no practice left that will undermine this, so that if the leader leaves, it doesn't matter. This is an agile organization. This is described by John Kotter as, first of all, establishing a sense of urgency. That is, what will happen if we don't become agile? If there can be no sense of urgency, don't proceed. Create a guiding coalition. This is the leadership team that will drive this across the years. And this is not necessarily the top-level executives. These are the influential people. Develop a vision and strategy. What is it going to be like when we have changed? Communicate this over and over again as we've done these engagements. What we found is if we think we're communicating enough, it's only 10% of what's needed. That is, if every person in the organization doesn't know what this means to them, they will at least passively resist it. We start also then empowering broad-based action, generating these wins, consolidating gains, and anchoring what we're doing. What we found very important is not skipping any stage, not stopping anything too soon to get immediate results. And here's where you may pass out. Cultural change that will really embed agility in an organization is not a 3-month process. It is not a 2-year process. It is a 5 to 6 year process. If you wish for an example of places that thought they could do it quickly or could ignore this type of cultural change and just do something different, all you have to do is look at the 30 to 40 years that Chrysler, Ford, and GM thought they could put lean words on top of their industrial processes and compete with Toyota. The result was bankruptcy for 2 of the 3 of them. So next steps, these are some ideas. We at Scrum.org, that's my organization from which I work, we have partners. So we have many partners in Europe, Switzerland, France, and we also have trainers and coaches. We have bodies of knowledge and assessments. So this is the knowledge of how to use Scrum. And each program is monitored and its quality is assured by us. What we've done is filled in the holes. Scrum is just a great framework, but it is absolutely full of holes. I thought when I first laid a Scrum out with Jeff that everyone would know how to manage an empirical process. Maybe not. Everyone as a product owner would know the value of agility and how to take advantage of quick increments. Not true. I thought that developers would know how to work in self-organizing cross-functional teams to build iterations of done functionality rapidly. Not true. So we have put all these programs in place, including a baseline bootcamp product called Professional Scrum Team Member to help people learn these things. The very last one we put in place was a surprise to me. We intended, when we rolled out Scrum, that the product owner is the person in the business who intends to wring value out of the agility afforded by Scrum. Much to my regret, what started happening instead was the development organization viewed the product owner as the person whose job was to complete the product backlog and to give them any advice they need. So we looked at it from the development point of view and told the product owner what he had to do for us. Needless to say, most real product owners fled because they had no intention of writing requirements. That's what they had gotten the business analysts for. And as a result, the business analysts started becoming what we found proxy product owners, proxy or surrogate product owners. And that just led to the same division between the real customer and development as we always had. So this new product owner course that we've started, the intention is to teach a customer, to teach a product manager how to gain agility if your development organization is using Scrum. And if it's not, to make them use Scrum, because you can't be agile if you're not using an iterative, incremental, quick, empirical process. So the things we teach in this session are the basis of agility, value-driven development based on key performance indicators, product management, how to plan a release that can be agile, how to manage requirements in a way so you can focus them on the highest priority things, how to plan functional, not major and minor releases, but just functional releases, how to manage these releases, and how to manage products to optimize the total cost of ownership. So this is teaching the people who engage software organizations how to achieve agility with those organizations. It's a complete course rewrite. And it's for product managers, program managers, and development managers, as well as business analysts who think they can fulfill this role. It also has an assessment, and if you achieve adequate score on the assessment, a certification. Just like our Scrum program, Scrum Master program, the assessment can be taken even if you don't take the course. A course is separate from proving that you know how to be a product owner. What I'd like to encourage you to do, because I'm coming to Europe next week, and I hope your weather is good, is next April 11th and 12th, I'm teaching one of these courses in Amsterdam. And I encourage you to attend to see how this is supposed to work, as Jeff and I initially intended it. And places where you can look for it, of course, is scrum.org. So the good news is we have made a lot of progress. It's not bad news, but the stuff that's become transparent to us is that we are not engaged in a small endeavor. That changing from thinking of software development and product usage from a manufacturing line to being a creative endeavor is a major organizational shift. And what Jeff, myself, and others are doing now is we're focusing on the organizations that are serious about making such a shift so it'll become embedded. If you're interested, scrum.org has many feeds about this type of stuff, both tweets and RSS feeds. So if you're interested, suggest you go there and look. Now we have some time for question and answer. What I'm going to do is shut down this slideshow and open up video so we can see each other. So give us just a few minutes and hope that the technology works.
Donc là, on va passer à une petite séance de questions.
That should do it. Great. I can't see you, so if you could turn on a video if that's possible, that'd be great. Okay, don't worry about it. Okay.
So we have a first question.
Hi, I have a question about what you presented first, the thermostat metaphor. What would be the temperature of a Scrum team, the equivalent? What are you measuring? What is a single value you want to measure?
Yes. In the Scrum team, the thermostat, the inspect and adapt, is the sprint review and sprint planning meeting where we inspect what now is the highest value thing to do in the business. That's the highest priority product backlog items with the increment that the team was able to build. And our adaptation is, given all of that, what is now the most valuable thing to do. Another example would be the retrospective, where we inspect how the last sprint went for the team, and we make adaptations to do things differently in the upcoming sprint. The last inspect and adapt empirical point is the daily scrum, where we inspect how the last day went, and based on that, compared to what we've committed to do, what we should change our work plan to be so that we increase our chances of delivering what we would. So each one of those is an inspect and adapt point, and each one of those has an artifact that has to be transparent for it to be successful.
Thank you.
Well,
D'autres questions? I think it was very clear. Samir? Okay.
Hello, I'm working on a project using Scrum methodology, and I'm still wondering how to take into account the support of features already delivered that are not working well. The notion of story is not, I'm not very comfortable with the notion of story to handle bugs in software. What is your approach to take into account bugs in already delivered software?
Scrum actually never says how you should manage your product backlog. It doesn't state that user stories should be used. That is a technique that that was incorporated in extreme programming that many people have written about and use because of its familiarity. In our product owner course, we cover a little of it, but we de-emphasize it because, strangely enough, very few of our customers or product managers or salespeople like having their requirements called stories, themes, or epics. They actually think of them as requirements for features, workflows, functionality, or product capabilities. One of the larger subjects that we cover in that course is how to describe the product backlog in terms and decompositions and many views that make it amenable to decision-making by a product manager. So I would thoroughly encourage someone to use whatever technique they work best, as long as their product backlog remains transparent and understandable by the people that are looking at it. Whenever I work with a critical application such as healthcare, life critical, mission critical, we almost always use cases for their precision.
D'autres questions? N'hésitez pas à en poser vos questions en français. Benoît se charge de la petite traduction.
Hello. Ok, la question c'est en Europe, surtout en France, Scrum a du mal à démarrer. Bon, il y a du monde, mais pas encore beaucoup. Un des problèmes principaux, c'est la formation, et notamment parce que les trainers, il n'y en a pas beaucoup en français. Comment on peut faire pour accélérer le process? Nous, on aimerait bien pouvoir rentrer dans ce système de training, devenir trainer, mais il faut être sponsorisé par 4, 5, 6 personnes, et c'est pratiquement impossible pour une société française d'être revu et puis de rentrer dans ce process pour devenir un trainer.
We have several trainers that I highly recommend in France. One of them you can identify who works for Pixis, P-Y-X-I-S, Emmanuel Estasi, who is in Grenoble. We also, if you can tolerate them, have a number of French-speaking trainers in Montreal who travel and have lived in France and work there. And we also have a number of French-speaking trainers who had lived in France but now live in Zurich, working at a company called Zulke, Z-U-E-H-L-K-E. The courses these people offer are listed at scrum.org. They also are willing to offer courses internally or arrange them if you need to. So either look at scrum.org under courses or just contact us and we'll put you in touch with some of them. What we've done to try to help you with this is these trainers use standardized materials and we continually monitor the feedback and the skills of the people they teach. I'm sorry, say that again?
To become a trainer. Micro est coupé. Non? T'as coupé le micro?
All they need to do is contact me or contact our support email, and we will discuss that. And you know what we're always looking for are people who know what they're doing.
Je vais profiter du traducteur. Il y a un grand problème culturel en France au niveau qu'on retrouve notamment beaucoup sur les marchés publics et qui s'appelle le forfait. Donc là, je pense qu'on est à peu près tous au courant. Alors, est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui est très, très, très français, ou est-ce que c'est quelque chose que vous avez rencontré il y a peut-être 10 ans dans votre contexte et que vous avez déjà résolu? Voilà.
Good. Tell me that again a different way. I didn't follow it. Yes. Yes. I understand. Okay, two suggestions. One, what I'm going to describe to you is rather quick. Second, we teach this in those 2 courses in Brussels and Amsterdam coming up. The one thing you don't do is tell the person you don't have to have fixed price, fixed date because you're using Scrum. People do fixed price, fixed date because they don't trust us. So this is what we've found very successful. We do whatever we need to do to give them a fixed price and fixed date based on the requirements that they've given us. And usually when we get a customer saying that, they also want to know what process we're going to use. We do not say Scrum. We say iterative incremental. This is already required by a number of governments. Then we say to them, by the way, because we're using iterative incremental, our price is a little lower, might be just because of Scrum's more productive. But what we've done is taken the liberty of prioritizing your requirements so that the riskiest, most high value ones, the ones you can give us the most feedback, are going to be done at the first, and the ones that are the least value, more trailing edge, are done at the last. This doesn't mean we're not going to do them all. It just means that we've sequenced them. Now, with this sequencing, we're going to do a bit of your system every month. Let's say we're using monthly sprints. And this means that after the first sprint, if you care to come and look and see what we've done, you can give us feedback on the way it looks, the way it feels, the coloration, that may help us then filter that into the rest of the things we build so it's much more likely to be what you want. We also give you 4 rights because we're using iterative incremental that you may not get from other organizations. The first is, since we do our work piece by piece, as long as it's not been done, if you have a change, and a lot of our customers come up with new things they want, we will price it as a standalone thing, and you can replace any 2 things in your list of requirements that haven't been done of the same price, as long as it doesn't violate dependencies. If you want to replace one that's valued at 6 with something that's 2 things that are valued at 3, that's also fine. The second provision is, as you're looking at those things and making the changes, you may want to resequence the order in which we've defined things. As long as we haven't already done it and doesn't violate dependencies, feel free. The third provision is, as you are changing and resequencing things, as long as we haven't already done it, when you see at the end of one of our iterations the result, let's say, of 3 iterations, and you say, I know we're not done, but we could use that already, we'll give you, and you can bring that and start using it immediately and get early realization of value. Now, of course, we haven't built the cost to do that for you, so it'll be time and material to implement it. And the fourth provision is, a number of our customers, as they're making changes and reprioritizing and doing early realization of value, they get only like 60% of the way through our entire fixed price, fixed date contract, and they say, you know, that's good enough. We don't need the rest. And if you do that, we will wrap up and deliver everything we've got. And well, of course, there's some unbilled revenue that we missed because in the fixed price, fixed date. So we'll charge you like 25% of that for opportunity cost. When you offer this, so first you're using Scrum, so your price may be lower. Secondly, people who aren't using Scrum or good iterative incremental agile process cannot offer these contractual provisions. So you have differentiated yourself even if the customer doesn't use one of them. However, if the customer starts using them, our experience has been that within 2 to 3 projects, they call you up and they say, we don't need a fixed price, fixed date contract. We are very comfortable acting as what you call a product owner. We feel very comfortable managing our risk and controlling the predictability of the project. So just give us 2 teams, let's say for 8 months, and we'll rent them on a time and material basis until we're done. The moment that happens, they have experienced the way of controlling and managing risk, and they are comfortable treating us as professionals rather than people they have to protect themselves from. This approach is now used widely in the U.S. Department of Defense, part of the Transportation Department, and many commercial organizations. And this is called a seductive approach. They don't even know that they're experiencing something new. Instead, they simply get to experience the benefits and then demand that it continue. This has become a way of anchoring yourself into the customer organization, because once they can do this with you, they will never let you go. That was a long answer.
Quelques questions encore. Nous touchons à la fin de notre session. Dans le bac. Bon. Nous allons conclure. Thank you, Ken. On peut l'applaudir, je pense.
Okay. Thank you very much. The last time I was there, there was a champagne reception, so I know you're eager to leave. I want to thank you for your time and encourage you to continually improve our profession. Thank you again.